for what we saw in Trafalgar Square?
Well, you could argue that that's part of Muslims' free speech, but the point that Nick Timothy is making is that there is the political wing of Islam that is firmly opposed to freedom of speech. And really, the free speech argument that is going on right now is whether Nick Timothy had the right to express that concern in the way that he did. And it's extraordinary to see Labour MPs and Labour officially calling for Kemi Badenoch to sack him from the front benches when he is raising extremely important concerns about the way that political Islam is trying to dominate our society, and we know that all too well. And unfortunately, Labour MPs can't appreciate how knowledgeable and well-read Nick Timothy is on this issue, and every time that people try to criticise him for what he said, all they have to say is that he's Islamophobic and bigoted. And of course, Steve Reid made it very clear in Parliament when the Islamophobia definition was announced that people criticising Muslim practices would not be branded as Islamophobic, or as they've now rebadged it, hostile towards Muslims. But that's exactly what's happened. So in less than a week, the definition that this Labour government has come up with to essentially stop people from saying what they want to say about Islam or Muslim practices, from stopping them from being able to say it. And they were very clear, they've always been adamant that free speech campaigners have nothing to be concerned about. Yet, but within less than a week, they've shown their true colours. And in many ways, it's very helpful that Nick Timothy has said this, not least because it's an important thing to talk about, but it's really tested what Labour actually wanted to do with this definition. And it's now clear as day what they intended. And it's given, it's empowered MPs who want to silence Nick Timothy to do so now that they have this definition.
So is it conceivable, Connie, that if we had this new law in place in regards to anti-Muslim hostility, that Mr. Timothy could have his collar felt?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he is. That is what's happening. I mean, you call
well,
it
he's being condemned at the moment, right? But you're saying that the police could be involved if, under the circumstances of this law going through.
Well, you're calling it a law, but actually the whole point, and Labour have made sure to stress this, there's a non-statutory definition. They've made it very clear that it's not the law, but that means, so it's not the law, but people will be prohibited from saying certain things nonetheless. It's like the new non-crime hate incident.
Right.
So, and Baroness Cahir, who's on the working group, who came up with this definition when it was released, she said that this would provide legal advice to institutions and essential clarity to institutions on how they operate. So it may not be law, but it would almost be better if it was the law, because then it could have been scrutinised by Parliament. Instead, the government handpicked 5 individuals who all have connections to Islamist groups to come up with a definition to shame people and punish people for saying what they really think about Islam and Muslim practices, and we're seeing it being played out.
I appreciate that detail, that correction, that it's not legally binding, but that it will have huge implications for people's lives, for their careers, potentially for their safety as well. We know that Nick Timothy has faced death threats since his intervention. Connie, given the terror links to the Islamic faith in this country, given the fact that in many Muslim communities, women are second-class citizens, claims of family voting in which dad decides who's going to get the vote in the ballot box, first cousin marriage, you name it. Is there a case for Islamophobia?
Do you mean in the sense that there's a case for people being Islamophobic, or the definition?
Well, no, to fear Islam as a religion and as a cultural
absolutely.
faith.
I mean, the word Islamophobia is an oxymoron. That Islamophobia suggests that it's irrational to fear Islam, when personally I would say it's very rational to fear Islam. And people keep saying, oh, Nick Timothy and the Tory party only have a problem with Muslims and Islam, but we have to. It is okay and absolutely legitimate to point out that Islam is very different to every other religion that is a big religion in this country. I mean, Islam is the second biggest religion in this country, and it's the only religion that has a political wing that wishes to dominate. Nick Timothy was absolutely right. We know that this is the case. I mean, even in Labour's new social cohesion strategy, they're very clear to say that Islamism is the biggest threat to us domestically, and we've known that for a very long time. There is, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Sikhism. You do not hear faith leaders of those religions talking about wanting to not just take part but take over. You don't see police going to mosques to consult them on how they should police, like we saw after those boys in Wakefield accidentally scuffed a Quran, where they dragged the boy's mother to go and speak to an imam which said he would happily die for the book. He said that on camera in front of police officers and the boy's mother. That's what's annoying about this, is that Labour in particular, and people across the political spectrum, perhaps even the Conservative Party until recent years, have not been happy to say that Islam is very different to other religions. And if you listen to people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who know far better than anyone else what it's like to live under political Islam and the stages of dawah, and that's what Nick Timothy means when he says that mass public ritual and praying and worshipping is straight out of the Islamist playbook. That was what was done under when Islam colonizing parts of the Middle East and Europe. In previous centuries, that was part of the plan to make sure that Islam had a dominant place in public life. And as you were saying earlier, in places like the UAE, this is banned. And the UAE has been giving lectures to the West for a very long time that we're making mistakes, that we should be banning the Muslim Brotherhood, of course. So it's just... I think that Labour MPs know what's going on, but they would prefer to ignore it. And then who can blame the public for assuming that they're doing this because they want to pander to the Muslim vote, which they're terrified, that is going to be lost to the Greens, and it's already been lost. So it's very interesting to see Labour's strategy when it comes to this issue, because whether they like it or not, whether they know it or not, Nick Timothy is a hero and one of the best MPs we've had for generations. To be calling this out after years of successive governments not being able to tackle this issue is extremely important, and will be looked back on in the timeline of how we dealt, if we ever deal with Islamism. Him making this statement will be such a huge turning point.
And Connie, what would you say to those who argue that the vast majority of British Muslims are peace-loving, they make a huge contribution to our society, and that actually to pray in public is something that's enjoyed by people of all faiths, including at Trafalgar Square, and that this is free speech for Muslims to pray in public?
Well, it is true that the vast majority of British Muslims aren't necessarily interested, of course, in committing acts of terror or politically dominating. But the issue is that we have a minority of Islamists who do want that, and they dominate the discourse. So the people who are one of the most affected groups and the most forgotten about when it comes to the government introducing this anti-Muslim hostility definition are normal Muslims, westernized Muslims themselves. They are the ones at most risk from talking out against the radical parts of their own communities. And also when it comes to this is again where we need to recognise the difference between Islam and other religions in this country. And Nick Timothy points this out, that Adnan, the call to prayer, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, that statement is a declaration of dominance, because it's telling you that the only true believers are Muslims. It's a evangelical religion that it is committed to try and convert as many people as possible. Until we are able to say that there is a difference between Islam and therefore the theological statements that are being made at mass prayers to other religions, then we're not going to be able to tackle this issue. For people to compare it to other expressions of religious praying and worship is very it's just not
disingenuous.
It's disingenuous to claim that it's similar, and until people get their heads around that. And there's this Einat Wilf, she's a Israeli ex-politician. She's coined this term called West-splaining, where people in the West do not understand what Islam actually is and therefore what Islamism is. We try to explain away things that Islamists are saying very clearly. They state in clear terms what they want to do, yet we are more comfortable pretending that they don't really mean it, or that they can't really mean it, because what you can't possibly understand wanting to do that. But give them respect that they deserve, and take them at their word. And that is not to say, like Nick Timothy says, that every Muslim at this public praying was an Islamist. But it is the case that mass demonstrations of worship is part of the Islamist playbook. And the fact that Sadiq Khan was there gives it political legitimisation within British politics.
And briefly, Connie,
and Nick Timothy should be allowed to call that out.
He should. Briefly, Connie, I suppose as a broadcaster and the external affairs officer of the Free Speech Union, And as a woman, you don't take kindly to the treatment of some females within Muslim communities.
No, absolutely not. And they are also a particularly vulnerable group if we stop people from calling this out, because we know for a fact that things like FGM, forced marriage, honour-based violence are more prevalent within those communities. And because of the way that this definition has been rolled out, which, by the way, the FSU has launched a judicial review against the government, telling them to withdraw the definition immediately until our case is heard, we know that this definition is going to stop people from being able to talk about practices. We've just seen it.
So this definition will make it harder to protect women in this country.
Yes, absolutely it will.
Surely the progressive left are very concerned about the safety of women in our communities. I'm so confused.
Well, it seems that parts of the progressive left...
I thought that was woke to care about women.
Yes,
I don't understand, Connie. You've got to help me.
Because they're more committed to the doctrine of multiculturalism than facing up to the truth. That actually calling out harm against women, no matter who commits it, is important. They find it very difficult to talk about these things because it shatters their own worldview that not all cultures are equal.
Connie, a privilege to have you on the show. A really important conversation. Thank you for your time and